Hello everyone, we're back today at SCR Soundworks with Josh Rozenboom. Thank you for having us over.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't think I've ever told you the story about how I came to know who you are.
Uh-oh.
Well, it's funny because it's embarrassing for a third party.
Okay.
And moderately embarrassing for me. But back when I was a student at MCC, which is not that long ago, I got a call towards the end of my time there from Keith Hefner.
Mm-hmm.
And I missed the call because I was in a class or something, but he left a message and I was listening to the message and it was, along the lines like, hey, Josh, I got your number from Andy Siegel and he recommended you to teach next semester. Anyways, he's like, give me a call back, I'd like to meet you. Something like that. And funnily enough, my first instinct was like, this is a mistake. But so I think my next class that day was with Ron.
Mm-hmm.
Llewellyn, and I showed him the message, and Ron like played it to me, and he's like, oh dude, that's good news. And I'm like, all right, one person is not thinking that this is a mistake.
Yeah.
So, okay, and then I missed Keith that day, but the next day I went to go see Keith in his office, walked in, and I'm like, hey Keith, and he's like, hi.
Can I help you?
And he's like, I'm here. You left me a message. And he looked at me and he was like, Josh Rozenboom? And like right there, I was like, and then you could see, once we both kind of confirmed that a mistake had been made, Keith's eyes were like, oh. He was cool though. He still like let me give an interview and like let me do the formal.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, sat me down and did that, and then it was really awkward. But after after that, he was kind of like, oh, I'm so sorry about this. I'll make sure that I get the right number. And I was like, yeah, man.
Oh, nice. Keith's awesome though.
No, yeah, it was funny. But then after that, I of course went home and I was like, who is this Josh Rozenboom guy that's confusing me? And that's how I found you out.
Nice.
And saw your place and would later rehearse here quite a bit with various bands and whatnot. But anyways, yeah, awkward, embarrassing story about how I came to know who you are. You never know how it happens, how you meet people.
That's interesting. I never knew that.
Yeah, I didn't know. I figured Keith wouldn't bring it back up because it was embarrassing probably for him.
Yeah, he never told me about it, yeah.
Do you still teach classes at MCC?
I do, yeah. I teach, this semester I'm teaching Studio 3. So.
Oh, yeah, nice.
Yeah, which is really kind of just making sure they don't burn the place down. But.
Yeah.
It's an easy and a difficult class at the same time because you want to jump in and fix everything and you can't. You just got to let them do it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like,
unless something's about to get broken, then you just hands off and let the students make their mistakes, which I'm sure my Studio 3 project was just like all theirs, But yeah, it's funny. When I started teaching though, my first semester at MCC, I had like 3 Tylers in rotation.
Oh God.
And I had the same exact experience where I had like a Tyler interning for me and then a Tyler who was a student who wanted to record an album and then a good friend of mine's named Tyler who's also in a band that I recorded for. So I had these like 3 different Tylers all contact me at one time and one of them came in to me in person and started talking to me and I'm just staring at him like...
You're like, wait a minute.
Yeah, I'm like, hold on. Like all the math is happening in my head and I'm just like, oh, wait.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I'm kind of glad. I mean, since then, I've had various different opportunities to teach at schools, and I know I'd be probably a pretty terrible teacher. So
I don't know about that.
But anyways, yeah. But here at SCR, you aside from having the rehearsal space, there's a studio that not many people seemingly know about.
Yeah.
And I find that very odd and surprising.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of good work that you do here.
Thanks.
Heavily in the rock and roll world.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I know that's not all you do.
No, but that's like predominant.
Yeah, and I think you do it really well because there aren't a whole lot of people in Phoenix left that I know of, anyways, that kind of do that like classic big rock, rock record sound, type thing. Because I do rock and roll and stuff under the rock umbrella as well, but I definitely work, on the more underground side, which here or there. But there's a lot to be said about that, just like that classic big rock sound and. Yeah. I'm really excited to kind of see some of your methods and processes for doing that because...
Right on.
Yeah. And just kind of like, let me know, or I'd like to start off by just talking to you, like are you mostly a rock music listener or a fan of...
Yeah, I'd say by far most of what I listen to is that. That's what I grew up with. And when you're a kid and like identifying this is my thing, that was it. You know, it was just big rock records. And like we're talking about, I grew up with the radio, and back when the radio still meant something, and that sort of shaped my aesthetic, and you know, guitars and drums and things that are bigger than life, and stuff that kind of sadly nowadays gets pushed to the side, or people don't think it matters as much anymore. But you know, there's a lot to be said for it. So yeah, that's the stuff I grew up with. That's what I listen to the most. But I am all over the place. I listen to a lot of like alternative country stuff, and I'm big into songs and songwriting, and you know, that stuff is really important to me as well. So, but yeah, guitars, drums, man, that's what I love.
Yeah, no, interesting, because like you bring up kind of country a little bit too. Like those two worlds I think are kind of really branching together today. Like the country rock world. I mean, it's all like country rock now. One thing that I really find interesting with the rock records that I'd like to ask you about is kind of pre-building that space. You know, because with those two records that I was telling you that I checked out just yesterday again, the drums sound big, the guitars sound big, but they're separated, which is a problem I have a lot. With music, you know, I have a really difficult time getting that kind of big, solid, you know, middle ground of drums and the low mids, but then getting the guitar to be over here, but also have that low mid energy.
Yeah.
And I don't know, is that like, I guess what I wanted to ask is, do you stack a lot? Is there like some method that you kind of use for that, or is it simply just building from the ground up in a way that I'm missing?
It's less is more. I don't stack as much as people might think. I try to get away with as little as possible, and that keeps from mucking things up. The Whiskey 6 album, full disclosure, I didn't mix that album, so that thing sounds phenomenal. But we tracked all the stuff here,
right? And
it's pretty much, we went about it the same way as we did the Central Divides album. One guitar left, one guitar right, carefully layering the tones. You know, that's a lot of it is just carefully choosing the parts. You know, lead guitars don't need a whole lot of bottom end and a whole lot of low mid stuff. We need to be nice and clear, and sometimes cleaner than what people may think, using less gain. And then you got obvious rhythm parts. The Central Divides was tricky because the two guitar players will switch rhythms and leads sometimes. So we had to think about that carefully and be like, oh man, I need like this guitar parts to take up this real estate sonically. And we tracked it that way, so that it came together much easier when I was mixing it.
When they would switch, like when a guitar player would switch from rhythm to lead, did you do both dubs? Did they continue to do that lead and you had it, or was it all of a sudden that rhythm part's gone, other rhythm guitars still playing, but instead of two rhythms, we now have a rhythm and one lead?
No. We actually tried to get one guitar player to play all rhythms and then one guy to play all leads. And so they were good enough that one guy was able to play another person's parts.
Oh.
As much as we could. And then there was just a little bit of juggling. Because I like to double track guitars. I mean, I like the nice even stereo spread.
With rock, that's a huge thing.
Yeah, totally. And I don't want too much stuff in the middle because I want my bass guitar and I want my kick drum and snare to be there. So all the rhythm guitars, you know, it's identical, 2 takes. You know, it's kind of hard to separate them out if a lot of people copy and pan it now.
Right.
It's going to be 2 guitar tracks. Tracked as tightly as possible. If it takes forever, it takes forever. You know, but you sit there and listen and tune and play a verse and a chorus and a verse and a chorus until it sounds good. And then,
so still no cheating.
Yeah, right. We tried to do it the hard way as much as possible because it's just better that way.
Yeah, like you get that organic. I mean, like you said, going back to the records that are made out in LA by the people we all aspire to be, they're not cheating. Or at least they didn't in the time when the rock records were really great.
Yeah, they weren't then because they had time to do it. You know? And there's stuff that I do. I mean, I'll whip out the mouse and keyboard and do some editing if I have to.
Right.
I'm gonna try not to, you know.
To go back to guitars and bass, because I know that this is something that I get asked a lot and that people always kind of run into. Separating rock guitar and bass, just like I was talking about with Zach and metal, is sometimes a huge fight.
Bass is hard. The guitar part is easy for me, right? I know I've played guitar for a long time. I've played a lot of different amps. I'm familiar with a lot of different types of gear and sounds. So it's pretty easy for me to do. And the problem, like you said, is getting the bass to have its own identity in the midst of having these big guitars. So one trick is the guitars don't have a lot of bottom end. It's low mid, you know. I high pass the guitars up to like 80, 90 hertz sometimes. Like go until the coolness starts to go away out of the bottom end and then back it off a notch, and that's where it sits. And then the bass, most of the low end of the bass is going to sit just below that. or even maybe around it too. But my theory, and what I guess, I don't even remember where I got the idea, but as I was learning about recording and studying things, I just got it into my head that I kind of want the bass and the guitar to act sort of as a system, right? To where the bass is adding the guitar you think is coming from, the bass guitar is adding the low end you think is coming from the guitars. And so sometimes I really have to kind of, records that I like, you'd be like, oh, that guitar is actually really not that low. The bass is just sitting in such a nice spot that it makes the whole thing sound huge. So yeah, guitars are all mid-range, but then the hard part is getting to hear the bass, the mid-range of the bass.
Possible curveball, fuzz guitar.
Oh man, that is so hard. Yeah,
because that's what I'm dealing with most of the time.
Okay, yeah. That's a different story. Yeah, and fuzz bass and fuzz guitar are sometimes almost the same thing.
It's like, forget about it.
Yeah.
No, that's usually my world, is dealing with heavily overdriven bass, we'll say, to fuzz bass, and then fuzz guitars.
Yeah.
And trying to get those two to separate, because fuzz guitars, just by nature of fuzz being what it is and just maximum, diode squashing, it sounds small.
Yeah.
It always sounds nasally and small. So, and lately I've been on my Joe Barresi kick. I'm a boost. Don't cut. Boost. And which is probably ill-advised for, not working in wonderful, beautiful studios like Joe gets to work in.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll do that. So I'll boost my guitars in that area where you were saying to cut, like around that 200, where like the lowest of a guitar really is. And then, but also boosting the bass and whatnot, and I'll get myself back into this mushy corner.
Yeah.
And sometimes I kind of just say, well, you know what, that's the sound.
Yeah.
And I'll live with it. But
yeah, that's one. So the stuff I've done with fuzz guitars that I thought turned out the best, I put a lot of time listening to it in the tracking stage, because for that reason, is like, there's not a lot of processing I'm going to do after the fact that's going to vastly improve the situation here. So I really need to be really careful about how I record this. Like the sound has got to be as close as I can get it now.
Right.
Yeah, that's the thing. Because if I don't, and that's another one too, where I have to decide these need to work as a system more or less. It's going to be really hard to get the guitars to pop out and the bass to pop out. Like Barresi is one of my all-time favorites. He's a huge influence on me.
Absolutely.
And you can hear those sometimes that like his stuff does sound a little squashed because he's just driving everything.
Well, I mean, he calls his place the house of compression.
Yeah.
And he's got racks and racks of just beautiful compressors and EQs and stuff.
Yeah.
He's definitely a fan of saturation.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely getting more and more into that and kind of using that as a trick to just make things falsely sound bigger than they were recorded. Because I used to be, and every engineer is, we were talking about a little bit before too, you recently got to spend some time at NRG, and you were saying probably the biggest difference between what we do here and what they were able to do there, because they had more time, was to focus on that initial sound coming out of the source. And I've definitely been stressing that a lot more. I've finally been able to slowly build up my mic locker and be able to use microphones that are more appropriate for things. So on fuzz guitars, I'll pretty much exclusively use ribbon mics.
Oh, nice.
Just to kind of, because I got sick of the whole all the way to 6K sometimes, just rolling it off.
Yeah.
Because then everything just starts to sound like this, and it's just all messed up. But yeah, really kind of putting in that time on the initial sound, I'm learning more and more. Not that it's any surprise, but really how important it truly is. And right behind that, the room that you put it in.
Yeah.
Which I know you used to have a guitar booth.
I do.
Do you still use it?
I just use it for scratch tracks.
Really?
Yeah, I don't. It's really handy for me for scratch tracking, so I can put a guitar player here, still keep the drums isolated.
And still get all that room for the drums.
Yeah. But a lot of times, I would rather have the cabinet in there. So if I can, then we'll shift gears. I'll throw the cab up in there and a microphone, and it turns out better.
Do you do a whole lot of live recording at all based on that, or most things kind of?
I guess it depends on your definition of live recording. 9 sessions out of 10, I have most of the band playing together at the same time. But this place is set up that I can isolate them still, to some degree. That room is not quite big enough to be able to put amps and drums all in the same room.
Not many in Phoenix are, yeah.
I know, which would be awesome, because that's the way I would love to work. It's a lot of fun, and I had to do that recently. I had to shift gears halfway through a day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we got 4 hours into it, and it's again like 9 out of 10 sessions I do. The guitar players in here, whoever's singing scratch vocals and playing rhythm section is in here, and then I'll do like so that day it was guitar, vocals in here, bass player, drummer in there, and they're like they're kind of older guys, blues band, really really super solid band, but they play together, and so we get like 4 hours into this thing, and the first couple songs went really well, and then all of a sudden the guy's like, man, I don't think I'm feeling this. I was like, all right, what do we need to do? How can I help? I want to be in there. It's like, all right, okay. So, shift gears, move everything into that room, and it took a while. I mean, it took some time to like.
Right.
I had to put the amps where I think they, set up the amps, come in here, have them play, listen to it. It's bleeding too much, or this doesn't sit together right. But in the end, we wound up with really good tracks, and they had no monitoring or anything. It was just them jamming together, playing the songs. The guitar and the bass, I had guitar amp and bass amp going, and everything bled together into the drum kit nicely. But the drummer was playing better because like everybody was there, and it was just what they were into.
Right.
So he's playing better. He's hitting the drums harder. It was cool, man. But yeah, it was kind of weird. Like 4 hours into the session, he's like, yeah, I don't like this. I'm like, oh, okay, all right.
I've experienced that same kind of issue too in various ways. Where you start off one way, you start off with how you think is best, and or even the way the band might think is best. Whoever, it doesn't really matter who initially starts an idea. But everyone will kind of realize, oh, like it's not really working. You just kind of got to switch it up. And I think that's something that is starting to be more and more realized by a lot of bands, which is probably why a lot of bands are starting to record themselves or attempt it.
Yeah.
Is because they're feeling a little better about being able to like, oh, like that 4 hours is going to go to a wash.
Yeah.
Because we have to change the method of how we're doing this.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important and really crucial, though, is being able to recognize that and admit to yourself that it's okay.
I think it is okay. Yeah, it's fine, because in the end, if you get everybody playing well, because the performance trumps any kind of flaws you might have in the process.
Yeah.
Performance wins all. So if it's not super clean and isolated, but everybody's ripping it, then that's what's cool, because nobody's ever going to care anyways.
Right, and it's all mixed. It's all mixed together, and you can always find ways. I mean, once you get, you have much experience mixing. Once you get a lot of that behind you, it's really easy to kind of work with those sounds and get it to work. And like the bleed in rock music, for me, is usually most of the time is beneficial.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Embrace the bleed.
Do you do a lot of click track here? Just curious.
I love the click track. I'm a huge fan of the metronome, but I will never force somebody to do it.
Right.
If they come in and they're like, it's not our thing, then I'm okay. I don't even put up a fight, because again, I mean, that's fine, dude. And a lot of records I love, a lot of bands I love, never used them. Yeah. So it's you don't need one to be great.
Right. Yeah, I think as long as it's as it comes across as humans playing music, I don't care, because there's many records where I was convinced it wasn't done to a click, and they're like, no, yeah, we all did it to a click.
Yeah.
But it was like human done to a click.
Yeah, if guys are too, if people are experienced with it, then there's always going to be that push and pull.
Yeah. They know when, and they know how to bounce back. You let a bar, because I've heard musicians where you'll get a head on a fill, or a guitarist will get a head on a lick or whatever, and they'll realize that they're off, and a pro can go, okay, I got a bar to bounce back.
Yeah.
Whereas somebody that's like, oh crap, I'm off, they'll either stop or they'll skip a beat or drop a beat, and then it's like, oop. You know?
And there are things that are natural, man, and there are people that will naturally anticipate a fill and they'll speed up a little. And when I'm editing drums, I like the click track because a lot of times I'm not just tracking live and the take is the take, and that's not how we work here most of the time. So that's why I like the metronome, is because it makes things tighter, but I also like it for overdubbing, and it's easier to work with overall. And if I need to move things around, tighten them up, it just makes life better. So when I'm editing drums, though, I will not sit there and just put things on the grid. It's like, oh man, they're both kind of naturally speeding up here or slowing down here, and I want to maintain that. Drummer in this section is laying back a little bit on the snare, and I always want to keep that fill. And I recorded drum tracks for a band from Dallas sometime late last year or whatever, and the drummer was pretty good, but they knew you're gonna need to edit the drums. So they came in, we cut the drums, I edited it, and then one of the producers called me like a week later, and he's like, hey man, it was after they got the whole thing done, and he's like, and it was actually Alan Niven, a guy, he's like the Guns N' Roses former manager. He calls me, and he's British, and he's like, He's like, I'm jamming this 383 album, and I just wanted to say thank you because you edited the drums, but you kept the feel, and that's what's most important in rock and roll. And I'm like, cool, man, thanks.
Yeah, it's huge.
So, yeah.
I really, I always go into every session I do kind of saying, I don't edit.
Yeah.
I mean, we all probably say that, like, I don't edit.
Yeah.
And we always end up doing it. But I definitely, when I have to edit drums, I try to do it in blocks. And if I know, and I'm pretty good at it now. Whereas if I get a take and I recognize that it's not block editable, meaning I can't take a big section and fix it easily, and it's more of like an individual hit thing, I'm like, redo it, just redo it.
Right on.
One more time.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
It's a time thing for me. It's like, am I going to fight this drummer for the rest of the day, or do I know that I can take half an hour and fix this later?
No, absolutely. I've had those really, really painful days where you have to make a quick decision, and that's also something that I'm getting pretty good at, is where I can kind of be like, that's the peak that I'm going to get out of this person.
Yeah.
Anything beyond, if I continue to push them beyond this, I'm just going to make them upset, make them feel worse about themselves, or cause hiccups that are unnecessary. And that's when then the next hard decision is, if depending on how bad it is, I'll be like, hey guys, just go rehearse, hit the shed, and then we'll try it again in 2 months or something.
Yeah.
But most of the time now, it's like, it's pretty good, and we're talking about just like that. Let's make it from pretty good to like great.
Yeah.
And I can fix that.
And that's cool, man. Yeah. And it's I don't like having to sit there and make everybody's performances perfect. It's not fun for me. It's not realistic. It is nice to be able to, if somebody says, oh man, I was late on this little thing right there, I'll go in and fix it. And I'm like, click, 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 done. And then they're just like, oh, you're a magician. Okay. But so you're recording Toso?
Yeah.
I did their first album. And I'm not throwing him under the bus because it has a happy ending, right? But Zach came in to record guitars the first day, and they spent a long time working on a song, and he was struggling with it, And so at the end of the day, everybody's after action review, it's like, all right, man, so this is the microscope you're under. Go home. I think they weren't coming back for a week or two, so it's like, practice these songs over and over and over again. And he came back. He did, and he came back and he ripped it. Like, just started knocking out guitar tracks, one after the other, double tracking them. It was incredible. It was awesome, and it made me so happy. And I tell people, I use him as an example a lot, because we could have just kept going the way we were going and not said anything to him, But he was receptive to the fact that like, oh man, I need to practice. It's like, then do it. Like, just woodshed on it, and he put in the work. Like, he put forth the effort. He came back and killed it. And it made me very happy. Like, and I think it was a good experience for them, and I just love seeing that. I hate's a strong word, but it just bums me out when people come in and they're not performing up to par, but they just leave on that note, and it's like, well.
In Phoenix, yeah, to go back to what we were talking about before we started filming. In Phoenix, there is like an odd feeling in the air that it seems, mentality towards recording. And I don't know if it's just based in a type of naivety or ignorance or something, but there's definitely that like unknown.
Yeah.
And I think hopefully these videos and other people too, it will kind of help bring that mentality back to be like, hey man, like we're all, it's not as easy as you think, but at the same time it's not as scary as you think.
Yeah.
And you don't have to put in as much legwork as you think, but you definitely have to put in some work.
Yeah.
And to go back to Toso, yeah, I mean, I actually was here for that first time because I was helping tune drums.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
That's when I met those guys. But they've continuously surprised me throughout this process, because we started tracking. We tracked them primarily live, pretty much live, and then we just did guitar overdubs, vocals, and we're almost done now. We'll do like a couple keyboards and whatnot. But every time they come in, like they're prepared, and they would because they would say like, oh, like they'd be like doing great work, and they'd be like, okay, we're gonna come back in like 3 weeks or a month. And I was like, oh man, like that long?
Yeah.
But in their defense, like they came back in a month and like, nailed it. One session done, whatever they're attacking.
Yeah.
Zach too. Zach is very, very good at knowing what he's able to do that day, and he kills it. He kills it at his tracks, vocally, whatever he's doing, guitar playing, he kills it, and they all do.
You're a big Steve Albini fan, and I guess I haven't studied him a whole lot, but I saw an interview with him, and this kind of something you said earlier reminded me of it. But It was he's doing some seminar. It was one of those online creative live type things, and so he's mixing this song, and the people are asking him about his production style, and he gave this whole spiel about he doesn't really like being called a producer, and he doesn't feel because it doesn't feel it's fair to him, fair of him to impart his opinions or preferences on a band that he just met. And so he likes to have time to work with people. He's like, I got to get to know somebody, and I have to figure out what's their definition of good. You know, what are they going for? What are their goals? How hard can I push them? You know, sometimes they're two different things, and he doesn't know that. And that's one of my favorite things I've ever heard him say. You know, how do I know when somebody walks in the door? So sometimes it takes a session or two to get to know people and build a rapport and think, all right, well, sometimes this is as good as they can do, and we're going to work with this. Or you learn that if I push a little harder, you know, they'll get better.
Yeah.
Or they need to learn to trust me. They need to learn to trust the process. And I can't just automatically assume they're going to be on board with everything I want to do, you know. And so there's a lot of, it's a true partnership in my opinion. And I really like to work that way. I don't like to have to come in and start, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this. You know, I want them to be comfortable, perform as best as they can, and then everything's gravy. So.
No, that's definitely a big influence. You know, it's no secret that Steve Albini is a big influence on me, mostly because of his philosophy. I do like the way he makes records and the way, like, you know, his methodology in recording. I definitely have stolen a lot of that, like many have. But I think I align mostly with his philosophy, and that, what you were just tapping on there, that's a huge part of it, because now, I was also telling you before, I kind of stopped, because when I first got started, I was always pestering people to work with and constantly putting, you know, trying to put my name out there, you know, and whatnot. And like anybody who starts out, they're just, you know, it's way too much overload. And now I've kind of gotten to the point where it's like, you know, I'm okay with working less. I'm okay with working with fewer, you know, artists and bands. I won't work with anybody blind anymore. Anybody that hits me up, I'm like every now and again I'll get a message from somebody that's like, hey, what do you charge? What are your rates? Yeah. And I dodge that. I'm just like, when can you meet me? Yeah. You know, I'm not interested in rates. You aren't either, really. Yeah. Like, come out and meet me, because if you can't hang out with me, then we can't make a record. Right. Like, right. That's the first red flag. Like, if we're sitting and we're just, so you like, you know, what? You know, so like, if it's like that, I can't make a record with that. You know? And I'd send them off to somebody else, or try to at least help them find somebody that they vibe with more. Yeah. And also, I won't work with the band without seeing them live. So I try to go to a show, and if I can't make a show, I bug them about sitting in on a rehearsal. You know, a couple rehearsals or something, because I want to hear the songs. I don't know how I'm supposed to record it if I don't know what I'm recording. And it also lets me kind of get a sense of how they react to each other, right? How they play their instruments, which is a crucial thing. And you know, all those little intricacies that most people kind of don't get to experience unless you do that. Right. And so I try to do that, and that's like probably the biggest thing that I've got, not just from Albini. I think most big names have kind of gotten to that point now where they're just like, don't go in blind. Yeah. You know, that's definitely a huge part of it. But yeah, cool. We've talked quite a bit about your room. Let's actually take a look at it and some of the cool gear in here, because there's some stuff that I definitely want to talk about. Cool, man. Awesome. All right, so the Toft. I remember some time back you guys picked this up, and that session that I was talking about earlier when I got to record Tommy over here on drums, we pretty much used 100% Toft pre's, I think, with the exception of overheads on the Pacificas. Yeah, nice. But I really, really liked the pre's on this thing, and the EQs sound great too. EQs are awesome. That's my favorite part about the board. Yeah? Yeah. And it can be kind of thick sounding, and it's very rock and roll sounding. It's sort of a cliche, but it is. Do you mix on it at all, or stem through it, or? I mix on it, yeah. I haven't been mixing on it for a little while because of recall. So yeah, and I'm juggling projects, and now I've got like 3 kids, so I can't just spend a lot of time here when I'm not supposed to be scheduled to be here. So I do a lot more out of the box mixing, and this is great because it's been coming up a lot recently in conversations with people, and I'm like, man, I haven't really mixed as much through it recently, and I kind of miss it. Right. Because I really like the stuff that I've done through it. You know, and I had a mastering engineer a few years back that I used to send all my stuff to, and when I got the board and started mixing through the console, I'd send him my stuff, and he's like,
did you get a console? I'm like, yes, I did. He's like, I got some depth to it. I'm like, all right, cool.
And then your monitors, you've got giant monitors.
I do, yeah.
But these are like the classic, I mean, what you kind of see at most studios that do almost anything.
Yeah.
Which pair do you prefer?
I prefer the BM15s.
Really?
Yeah. Shane Matsumoto prefers the Genelecs, so we're always flipping back and forth. I prefer the Dynaudios because they're not as flattering, I guess. The Genelecs just fooled me. And as soon as I went back to the Dynaudios, everything translated better. When I heard here, translated in my car and stuff, so it's just...
Really?
I just like them better, yeah. They're a little more raw and woolly sounding to me, so...
That's so funny because I think I'm the exact opposite.
Yeah.
I can never trust to what I'm hearing on the Dynaudios to transfer to like my truck.
Right.
But on a Genelec, it always works.
Yeah, it's funny.
For me.
I didn't have that experience at all. I was battling it when I was using the Genelecs. I'm like, man, what's going on here? This doesn't work for me. But I've been mixing on Dynaudios for a long time, though.
Yeah.
Those are like the first good monitors I had were a pair of BM6s, so
right.
I'm just kind of used to it.
They're not, I mean, neither set is bad, but just,
Yeah.
that's why they make multiple, that's why all these companies are staying in business is because
that's
everyone
all preference.
hears slightly differently and
Yeah.
what translates was what translates.
And the Genelecs, like, they're awesome speakers. That's the thing. Like, they're awesome speakers.
And these are the 1032s, right? The big ones?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're incredible monitors, but the Dynaudios I'm just happier with them.
Interesting.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't change. The Focal Twins are the other monitors I've used that I really were like blown away by.
Really?
Yeah.
You didn't mind the driver change? Because I think these are 9s or 10s, right? And then the twin 6s, right?
No, the stuff that I did in here, and then I went and listened to them on the Twin 6s, it worked fine. It wasn't missing anything by any means. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, that's cool. Kind of come around here. This rack here, is this like what do you kind of use these for?
I don't use the massive passive for tracking as much. The Very-Mu I use for tracking a lot, and I run, especially when I mix out of here, I mix through the Very-Mu as well.
Do you use it as kind of a mix bus processor?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. And sometimes the massive passive if I need help. It's been used for mastering a lot in here.
Okay.
But the output of the Toft is a little bit low going back into Pro Tools, so when I just go through that and boost the gain a little bit, and then a little bit of compression with it too. But it's a really killer compressor, but it's sort of more gooey and not really aggressive in my opinion. So it's pretty easy to put on a mix bus and not kill it.
Do you use this old DBX at all for drums?
Yeah, man. Actually, I put the kick and snare through it, and it works. Yeah, surprisingly, like some people would take a look at it and go, "Oh, that thing." No, I can get it. I can get some nice kick and snare out of that. So.
Well, I mean, it's basically a 160, but it's stuck in over easy mode, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it doesn't have the fast mode.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, on a mix down, I've got a pair of 160s, and I use them in over easy mode, anyways.
Yeah.
I'll use them in we'll say normal mode.
Yeah.
For tracking, and I'll just kiss it.
Yeah.
It's great for that. But for a mix, I always go to over easy because it's my ghetto transient designer in a way. Like it adds just a little bit more stretch to the transient. It makes the sound just a tad bit thicker.
Yeah.
So I like it for that.
Yep. Yeah, it is. It definitely. I have to take it a little bit easy. So it's great for the kick. It can make the kick kind of have some nice boom to it if I need to.
Right. Yeah. And then of course you've got a distressor.
Yeah.
That's probably the smash box, right?
Love the distressor. Yeah. Slate just put a distressor plug-in in their mix rack.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, their version of the distressor. It's way cool. Yeah. I'm gonna be putting on everything, probably overkill. So.
Do you A/B them at all?
No, not yet.
Yeah.
No, but it's awesome. I've used that distressor on everything I've recorded since I bought it, so I'm intimately familiar with it. And yeah, the slate version is really nice.
Yeah, the distressor is something I've been hesitant to pick up for a long time.
It's super versatile, but it's easy to overdo. I mean, I was overcooking things left and right when I first got it.
I used it when I was here, and I definitely overcooked it.
Yeah,
The one mic it was on.
Yeah.
But it's so easy to do,
know. Yeah.
Right below it, talking about aggressive pre's the Pacifica, that's even more aggressive than the board.
Yeah.
But that was, I think that's what like you have it marked, I think I was using it on overheads as well.
Yeah.
Just because it does something special to cymbals, and it sounds great.
Yeah, it's a fantastic preamp. Big fan of the Pacifica. I wish I had a whole rack of them.
Right. Do you use it a lot on guitars as well, or do you favor the board for guitars?
No, I go between the APIs and the Pacificas. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Pacifica I like just because they're slightly different from each other, that's all.
Yeah.
Yeah. The APIs can sometimes be a little bright for guitars for me, a little mid-forward, but
Yeah.
the Pacificas aren't quite as pretty sounding, I guess, in a sense. I don't know how to describe it, but they're just different.
Yeah, well, the Pacificas I really like, but API, it took me a long time to really appreciate API, which is probably a lot of people are going, what? But yeah, that same thing. Like I always thought that they lacked. We were talking about dark pre's, you know, they lacked that gooey low mid thing that I liked. They don't have a whole lot of weight.
Yeah.
To my ears, and they are very mid forward, and so it's like anything you put through it was right up front, but sometimes that always caused issues.
Yeah.
And of course, the famous thing that everything is modern too hot.
Yeah.
So you always have to like pad it and then pat it again. And
Yeah, and the pad really changes the sound of the API.
It does.
Very noticeably so.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess I like tracking bass through the API because the bottom end is cleaner on it. It's just cleaner and tighter. The Pacifica is a little bit more like pillowy and soft and dirtier, I guess, in a way.
Well,
it's got huge transformers in it. Like that thing
Pacifica?
is really heavy.
Oh,
yeah.
well, it's like 70s influenced,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But to go back to the API just for a second, I definitely hear it now. Like the color from an API, I have the closest thing I have to it is Dakings, which I know are supposed
Those are
to be
great though. Yeah.
Yeah, they're supposed to be Trident inspired, but they sound more like because they do that mid forward thing, so they live on guitars for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely hear it now, and the color of the API is something I'm getting more and more attracted to. The DI is really useful for bass. So yeah, definitely great pre's, but it took me like 5 years to appreciate it, really.
Yeah.
And then beforehand, you were talking to us a little bit about these amps.
Oh, the Metropolis.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're talking about rock and roll, and like the old school Marshalls are the sound of rock and roll. And, so this is a guy out of Detroit, George Metropolis, and he used to build Marshall clones and replicas, and he would build kits that guys could put together themselves, and then he started doing production model amps. And really high quality, man. He's got a basement full of old amplifiers, and he's really brilliant at reverse engineering some stuff. He's done that kind of thing for big companies that have done reissues and stuff, and they've hired him to like, hey, take apart our vintage model and help us for the reissue. So he's done that kind of thing. But this is, like, if there was a modern version of a vintage Marshall, this would be it, because it's got things that people want nowadays. It's got a gain knob on it instead of just a master volume or no master volume, just the channel volume.
Yeah, the preamp
the classic Marshall thing. A vintage Marshall Plexi just has a volume knob on it, and you crank it, and it's super loud and really unmanageable, but awesome sounding. So this actually has preamp drive on it. It's got a gain knob. It's got push-pull, different circuits. It's also switchable. He's got a 66 super lead circuit, a 68 super lead circuit, and then like a modified circuit as well. And you can switch between them, and the foot switch, it's just got a ton of options. You can get a really, really wide variety of tones. So this has been a fun thing to play with. I really love it. He does amazing work. I wish more people would buy his stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it sounds super intriguing. I mean, I had a Marshall for 11 years. Kind of regret selling it, I just had the 900, the JCM 900. I liked mine because those are definitely amps that are hit or miss.
Yeah.
But it definitely turned me on to the Marshall thing. The thing I love about Marshalls is they don't have a whole lot of nasty, unusable low end that like most other amps have.
Yeah.
So I always had the bass dimed.
Yeah.
But they break up beautifully, I think.
Yeah.
If like fuzz and overdrive and all those rock distortion gross tones are your thing, Marshall to me is like the best loud amp to do it with, short of like getting all the different squawk box combo amps that you can find.
Yeah.
But that's really cool. That sounds super intriguing.
Yeah, man. It's a killer amp. It's a lot of fun.
Cool. Are we able at all to see the live room?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So this is the live room. I remember you've changed it a while ago because it wasn't always quite like this. It definitely feels a lot more vibey in here now.
Yeah.
And I remember that was done some time ago now, but it still feels really cool in here.
Thank you.
And it's definitely, I wouldn't say this is small.
Yeah.
This is definitely, like I said, for Phoenix, a solid medium room.
Yeah.
That you can definitely, and you can kind of hear probably, I don't know if you can hear a little bit, there's a little bit of a reverb in here.
Yeah.
It's not crazy, but I would say that it's super usable for drums.
Yeah, it could be a little longer, and I think it's doable to do in the room. So we're planning on rebuilding the room here in the next like year or so, and putting together like this one and then the rehearsal room that's next door. I'm gonna
Okay, so just knocking down the wall,
exactly.
basically.
Rebuild the whole inside of this, which is what best case scenario. And so if that doesn't happen, but I may do it anyways, is to probably just slot resonate this wall, build a slot resonator over the whole thing. So, and then I can remove some of the high mid absorption from around the rest of the room.
Right.
And that way I can still even out the room, but put a lot more energy back into it.
Right.
Because I really want like a little bit of a longer reverb time. And yeah, but the way I had it before, the cymbals were way too washy in here. It used to be a little bit more lively,
Right.
but the cymbals were just too washy. So.
Yeah, and that's the tough thing from drums is, kind of teaching drummers, and if they can't realize, but I've had to, sit drummers down and be like, hey man, like, cymbals are always going to win
Yeah.
in a death match against shells.
Yeah.
So I always try to tell them, you can hit them hard, but you gotta equally power the toms, otherwise it'll be all cymbals.
Yeah.
And it's always funny because my favorite is when every now and again I'll get a drummer and they'll come in and they'll be like a basher, and it'll be all cymbals, obviously.
Yeah.
So they'll be like, can we throw mics up on the cymbals to spot mic the cymbals so we can control them? And I'm like, well, it's not going to make them quiet.
Yeah.
All right, Josh, well, thanks for having us over. It was really cool to see this place and talk about rock, talk about, all the things that are kind of associated with rock and different problems that I've had, and to talk about guitars and drums and stuff, going over the gear and whatnot. Super fun. Super fun to talk about that amp, too. I'd really like to hear that sometime.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I got to get back over here and hear that sometime. But yeah, super fun.
Cool.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
Thank you.